If you are drinking coffee this morning, or mainlining it like we are, you may not be thinking about what it took to get those beans from crop to cup. But the man you're about to hear from sure did. Mokhtar Al-Kanshali lived through a harrowing journey and a dramatic escape to bring one of the oldest coffees from Yemen to the rest of the world. His story is now being told in a new book by celebrated author Dave Eggers. CBS Evening News anchor Jeff Glor sat down with them at the Hudson Hotel Library and Lounge right here in New York.
Mokhtar Al-Kanshali was 24 and working as a doorman at a San Francisco high-rise when he got a delirious idea. Leave the Bay Area for Yemen and start a coffee business.
I see the coffee trees and I get distracted.
What he didn't plan on was getting trapped in the middle of a civil war. It was a story Dave Eggers felt compelled to tell.
And I'm always attracted to stories of self-invention and entrepreneurship and, self-creation.
And that's what he's done.
Nobody dreams the American dream better than immigrants and the sons and daughters of immigrants.
Al-Kanshali's journey is documented by Eggers in the Monk of Mocha. The port city, Mocha, on the Red Sea, is where the first ever coffee beans were exported in the 15th century.
The amount of pluck and just, Mokhtar calls it naive arrogance, that goes into sort of starting a business from scratch, going to Yemen, not knowing anything about coffee cultivation and creating a business and rallying and organizing all these farmers around a new idea of a new way of life. It was just incredibly inspiring.
Naive arrogance.
Yeah, I think the lack of knowledge really helped me because in the early days I had these SWOT diagrams. I would write up strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So under threats I had things like Al-Qaeda, pirates, political instability, things that any logical
minor
person...
things.
But they...
Standard for any startup, Algerian pirates.
And looking back at these reports I wrote myself, I'm like, what was I thinking?
On the pro side, it was, this might work?
On the pro side, it was building a bridge between two worlds.
Eggers is known for telling personal stories, including his own. His first book, a heartbreaking work of staggering genius, was a memoir about raising his younger brother after losing both parents to cancer. It went to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. For this book, Eggers spent years listening to Al-Kanshali's story, traveling with him from California to Africa.
Your story is the most personal asset that you have, and I couldn't have done it with anyone else. To be able to be that vulnerable, Dave was someone who was very caring and very loving, and that made it much easier to do because some of the parts of the book are really hilarious, but others we had a lot of tissue paper.
During one trip to Yemen, Al-Kanshali found himself trapped as bombs rained down on the capital. Yemen's civil war had begun.
And these blasts, these airstrikes, there's no pattern. They're just very sporadic, and you hear the ground shake and children crying. And it was very hard to live that moment. The people were really weeping, and at one point, people stopped weeping, and there was a sort of kind of tranquility that came about. We decided to submit and let go and know that we're not in control anymore. And that feeling really helped me a lot.
And so what was that process like, talking to him and taking him through your story?
Well, in particular, because Dave had the foresight of starting backwards. A lot of those traumatic experiences had just happened to me just a few weeks before. So going really deep into the pain, into those moments with Dave, in a way was somewhat therapeutic for me.
It's a good idea. Tough idea, but a good idea.
Well, I always go into it knowing at any point we can stop. And nothing gets printed without Mokhtar's approval. And we meet when he wants to meet, and we talk about whatever he's comfortable talking about. That's why it takes a long time, almost 3 years in this case.
What surprised you most about the process with him?
I guess I came into coffee as a skeptic. I had my first cup of coffee when I was 35, when my daughter was born, and I needed some mental acuity during the day. I needed a different kind of caffeine. And I used it just as fuel. I put a lot of sugar in and just drank it to stay awake. I was still kind of cynical about the $4.75 cup of coffee, or more expensive. I thought, that's ridiculous. That's so pretentious. But then to sort of backtrack and think like, well, what should something cost? And the coffee gets picked individually. Every cherry has to be chosen by a picker, put in their bag. I'm always thinking of the person who first picks that ripe ruby red cherry. You can't get these people out of your mind.
The monk of Mocha gradually weaves together the history of coffee, Alkanshali, and his ancestral home. 3 years later, the war there continues.
It's a horrific situation, the single worst humanitarian crisis in the world. 18 million people are food insecure. That's 70% of the population. There's over 3 million refugees now because of this war. And for me, on one hand, I do good, and I feel that I'm helping my farmers make a better living and help people learn more about Yemen. But I sometimes do feel that it's a small dent compared to the suffering that's going on. And I know this war will end, and I believe that my project will outlast these bombs.
He thinks coffee can heal division here at home as well.
This cup of coffee, it's crossed cultures and borders and political hardships to find its way to you. And I think it's an incredible opportunity for us to really be engaged with each other.
For CBS This Morning, Saturday, Jeff Glor, New York.
I love what Dave Eggers said at the beginning of Jeff's story. Nobody dreams the American dream better than immigrants.
And kudos to him for drawing global attention and domestic attention to the absolute crisis unfolding in Yemen. That is a beautiful story.
It is.